Kia ora koutou, kia ora koutou, kia ora, Aotearoa. Welcome to the first Kōrero Live of 2022 for Te Wiki o Te reo Māori. And our special guest, as most of you will recognise, but if you don't know this man, this is Dan Te Whenua Walker. So Dan, how are you today? Kia ora.
Kia ora hoa, ai, pai matua I ki au, I tēnei wā, and ngā mihi nui ki a koutou I te wā, te whakanui ai te wiki o te reo Māori. Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi. Okay, so what are we here to have a kōrero about, people? Well, if you haven't read what I wrote, then as I was once an ignorant Kiwi who didn't know about the history of our country. And of course, our children are going to start learning this next year as history has now become part of our curriculum. But just to give you a speed up, or bring you up to speed, back in the 1860s, 1867, was essentially an eradication program for the te reo language set about by government with the native schools program. It's all readable. You can search it. So hopefully you go and do that research. But this explains why so many Māori don't speak their own language. And over the years, I got frustrated with being asked by new Kiwis especially, but also some Kiwis, you know, why don't Māori speak Māori? Why should I learn Māori? They don't even speak themselves. And no one knew the reality of the situation. Hence, I think 3 generations have been affected. And now there's this resurgence. And, you know, I think it's basic human right to be able to speak your own language. And of course, when the government did something to try and stop that, I think that's really wrong and not a part of our history that I'm particularly proud of. Therefore, what we're doing here is creating some new history that I can be proud of, which is supporting and learning te reo myself, but also sharing the stories of those that can pass on the information from a personal perspective. So it's not just text in a textbook or the history book, but real life stories. So we've got 3 questions that we're going to look at today. And we did this in 2020. And then I took time off in 2021 because I felt I should leave space for others to get stuck in. But I wanted to do a recap and to actually continue to show my support. So Dan was on the original show and shared his story then. But for those that haven't heard it, Dan, if you could take us through your personal journey with te reo to give people some perspective and context, that'd be beautiful.
Ka pai. A tuatahi e mihi ana ki a koe. I te rangatira, Ryan. Good to catch up with you again, bro. And I thank you for creating spaces like this. And you always are you know, making sure you're pushing onto these edges, which is awesome. And it makes spaces for others too. So thank you. And kia ora koutou to everyone else across the world who's listening. Ko Dan Walker tuku ingoa, he uri wake ke au no ngā iwi kei roro e te kōrero i te maunga ti toea, ara ko te waka Aotea, ko tito ko ware te tangata, ko manu ia kai te apu, ko Ngāti Ruanui, Ngārui Inerangi o ki iwi. So just want to recognise that I come from the lands of Taranaki, and I mihi and acknowledge all of your lands, your mountains, your rivers, your ancestors at this time. So for me, my journey in te reo Māori was actually recent. I grew up basically colonized. I didn't have my language at all. And it wasn't really, there was a desire in me, but I was trying to get to a point where I could actually take care of my whānau first. So my focus at the start was work, education, trying to climb that ladder and getting to that point. And I remember the day when I said, no, I've got to change this, was when my first boy was born, Joshi. Who you know, bro, Joshi, and
absolutely.
We were burying his whenua. So for Māori, we take their placenta back home, we bury it in their tūranga waiwai, the lands where they come from, and that brings that tight connection to who they are back home. And my cousin Te Puhi was doing a karakia, and I had no idea what was being said. I had no idea about what was happening, and I said, man, I've just got to change this. I didn't want the same kind of inferiority complex, the same kind of probably confidence issues that I have and had. I still have. I don't want that for my son and my other 2 tamariki as well, Tyler and Maya. So I went on that journey, and I started 12 years ago. went down to my local marae in Whangaparaoa and went to Te Herenga Waka o Rewa. Shout out to the whānau there, Kiriama and the Netana whānau. And just went to, it was Tuesday nights from 5 till 10, rumaki reo, so full immersion reo, and then one wānanga every month. And it was brutal, bro. Especially being a papa, trying to be a good provider, good husband, all of that stuff, being a good dad. And just, te reo Māori takes a lot from you, unfortunately, in our society, to be able to go on that journey of learning our reo. For anyone, it's a big commitment. Unless you're fully in and immersed in the culture and the kaupapa, which is why a lot of our whānau do that. But for me, I was still very much in that corporate world. So it was sort of fly in, fly out. And for that reason, it took me a long time. It took me, I would say, at least 4 years of hard graft, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of time trying to learn my reo. I couldn't do it. I was wondering, I'm just so dumb. And it just happened, actually. And it wasn't actually anything through writing or through learning through that. I need to speak it. And if I speak it, things start connecting. And for me, I believe it was a spiritual thing. So getting my spirit, my wairua right first, and then through that, I could finally release the reo, which was inside me, and allow my tupuna to flow through me. And then now I can feel like I can speak. I'll just say this quickly, bro. I was at a beautiful, shout out to my whanaunga Hayley, who's at Fonterra. She organised an amazing kapahaka rōpū ngā tauira Māori from Waipapa Taumatarau, University of Auckland, who came in and did a big, amazing kapahaka set. And Hayley's like, right, you get up and you do the mihi to them. I was like, I would never have done that 10 years ago in terms of stood up and speak te reo Māori in front of hundreds of people, but I just did it. So yeah, I've come a long way from where I used to be, is what I'd say.
Congratulations. And a range of elements to touch on there, but one that I think is really important for everybody is the difficulty that it can be to learn a second language. So when you learned te reo, it was your second language, like wasn't your third or your fourth, it was your second language.
Aye.
Correct?
Aye.
Yeah. So it can be quite daunting. You sort of think, how will I ever learn this whole new operating system? But the magic is that you do pick it up, and when you get going, I feel like I'm on the verge. You start with simple things from words, and you start replacing words like I tautoko you instead of I support you, atahua instead of that's beautiful, and then you start putting it into sentences and understanding the structure. So I learned French at school. Māori wasn't an option, but I had to learn a language. And the little sort of lesson here that I'll cap off before we come back to you is that by learning French, it has the same language structure as Italian. So when I went to Maui, I learned Italian, but I was fortunate enough that in Standard 3, I don't know what they call it now, is when they started teaching Māori in state schools, as far as I'm aware. And we got taught the vowels. And I remember the teacher still holding the chart. It was like a picture of the countryside, and why is the water, etc. So the Māori vowels and Italian vowels are the same. So all my Italian mates were saying, "Oh, you'll never learn Italian. It's too hard. And the next thing, here I am, boom, 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 boom. They're like, oh. Even to the point that because they speak dialects too. I learned a particular dialect for Milan, and when one of their friends came over, and I was 6 months in, I spoke to him, and he said, in Italian, "Oh, where are you from?" I was like, "Dunedin, New Zealand, bro." He's like, "What?" So that's just a good wee story for everyone to feel excited about. You can get over this hurdle, and like you talked about, 4 years of hard mahi, and along with it, there'll be depending on where you are, whether you're Māori or non-Māori, all these different additional factors, emotions, and feelings that will be wrapped into it for you. So, my last word is ultimate encouragement for everybody. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, bro.
So,
And just on that, I'll just say, you're totally right about the source language. So Maiko Mātua calls it he kupu whanaungatanga. It's the relatedness of Te Reo Māori to so many Pacific languages, and Kei Marie can actually talk to that as well in terms of so many similarities to Tahitian, to Hawaiian, to Rapa Nui. You know, in terms of learning Te Reo Māori is no longer just learning the one language. It's a source language which opens up so many doors. And yeah, I think it's a biggie.
well, I understand that tahirua toru wha rima, it's the same in either Taiwan or Philippines. So there's a whole lot of words that are the same across those languages, exactly the same as a Māori. So I discover these by having discussions with people, you know. Like I was talking to my, having to do my Uber driver, but I said, Ni hao, wu jiao, Ryan, ni na. And he's like, you speak Mandarin? I was like, just that part, but that's a good start, right? And it just opens up conversation like you wouldn't believe. You know, especially when you look at me, I don't look, well, I was going to say, I don't look that friendly, unfortunately, especially when I'm cruising around West Auckland. But so it's a great way when I speak someone's language to completely disarm the way I might appear to them as the, you know, bald-headed, bearded rugby guy. But coming back to you, let's look at question 2, right? So this is something I've got my views on, but I'll keep my wahoo shut and hear your response first. And that is, over the 2 years since the first series of interviews that we did, what are all of the things that you've seen shift and change? How do you feel about where Aotearoa is going? How are we tracking with our te reo from Dan's perspective?
Bro, it's gone from 0 to 2000 in you know, just a matter of minutes. It's been massive, and it's amazing to see. It's beautiful to see as well when we can look on TV and we can see the language being embraced by Māori and non-Māori on there. We can see it being embraced in lots of different other spaces as well, like going down to McDonald's or KFC, or going into you know, libraries, into businesses. We're doing it here at Microsoft. Obviously, over at Fonterra, we had a massive celebration just now. We're seeing it across the board, and it's so beautiful to see, iho. And I think if you could look at one thing that's the momentum that's coming, I think Te Reo Māori is a great litmus test in terms of how we're tracking, or the direction of travel for us as a nation, because it's coming no matter. You know, a lot of people are trying to hold it back in different ways, and that's Māori and non-Māori as well, but it's coming. It's definitely, people want to learn it, and we need to think about that and have that cordial about how we manaaki people through that, both Māori and non-Māori as well. You know, I was at a beautiful kaupapa on Friday night called M9, and the speakers there, every one of them was just amazing and beautiful. And they talked about, we call it Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, but it you know, for some, it's also the Diala Māori space as well, in terms of there's quite a cultural load on those who are Māori in different spaces to step up and to run all these programs and things like that. So it's very important that we, as a nation, manaaki those Māori who are in the spaces where we lack Māori, to ensure we don't put that cultural load on them as well. But we've come a long way, and it's really, for me, it's great to see what we're doing.
Absolutely. And I completely get what you mean. So let me share that as a result. One of the results of doing the 2020 series is that I learned so much about identity and the power of identity, you know, in interviews with the likes of Pāta Wetini that runs a facility down in Waikato. I don't want to use the reference correctional facility, but that's probably the best reference I can give it. But for a Māori woman, and specifically designed, and not just the building, the facilities, but the programs. And rather than putting people in prison in a cell and them becoming worse as a result, the results of them going through and learning their identity, learning their language. Also, Dan Te Whenua, who spoke about working in men's prisons. And another that's been a little bit more recent, you might have seen one of Dave Lately's posts, similar, not that he was doing identity, but was still in there having a discussion and just touching on that, why am I raising that? 50% of prison population is Māori, and the news love to put it down. But if we as a nation understand, look at the language eradication program that I put in my post as one symbol of what colonization encompassed, then you can understand there's a bit of a reaction that's going to happen. But the power of identity. So going back to the end of the story, I went and discovered my Irish ancestry and went along to the Auckland Irish Society, and I am
I'm Irish too, bro. I'm Irish too.
Okay.
I'm Irish too. Yep.
Well, I've got 2 words down, or 2 phrases down. Jaya do it, which is g'day, and Gore mea gat, which is thanks a million. But I haven't been driving my te reo lessons, and I haven't been driving my Irish lessons. I haven't even been to one yet, 7 p.m. Monday night. But this is just to share that, the guy here on screen, life's not perfect for me. So if anyone out there who's struggling, don't feel like you should throw in the towel. You should just keep being encouraged. And you talked about, from the likes of New Zealand, the actual video now is this beautiful story about kaitiakitanga. And they have the waka pick off the lake and fly through the sky and tell the story, go through the forest. So it's actually sharing the core stories of Māori mythology and creation. But I want to come back to you, finish on before we go to question 3, is Global Chair of Indigenous for Microsoft. Now, to me, this is a monumental move by a global corporation that's all about technology, and you might have said at one point in time, not really much about people. But this move is so much about people because it's about Indigenous. So as a global co-chair, can you give us a bit of a idea, rundown, update of what's happening, what's planned, and all the rest of it?
Yeah, for sure, bro. And as you know me, I'm not big on positions or anything either. It's more about the person, and are they a good person? Do they do good things in their community? Do they uplift the right kind of people as well? And I do want to acknowledge there's amazing people who have helped put me into that role. But Microsoft has certainly been on the journey. We've got a lot of growth over the last 2 years since we last talked, bro. So when we last spoke, the Indigenous at Microsoft had 20 people in it. We've now got 3,000 people globally in the Indigenous at Microsoft whānau. And we've got leaders stepping up, different people. We've launched chapters across the world. We've got a US chapter, Canada chapter. We've got a Pacific chapter, which I'm particularly passionate about because I think Māori has whanaungatanga in there as well. And Teresa and Jackie run that. We've got an Australian and New Zealand chapter as well. And not only that, we've also got business chapters. So we've got Indigenous at LinkedIn, Indigenous at Minecraft, and Indigenous in Xbox. And Jen runs as the head of Indigenous at Xbox, and she's done some amazing stuff for us as well. So, I think what I really want is a culture change, and how do we make sure that when Indigenous come into Microsoft, they feel like it's a place where they can do their best work. And we can only do that by changing the culture. How do we celebrate the spaces that are special for them? If it's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori or Matariki or Waitangi, overseas it's NAIDOC in Australia, or in America or US, it's the Trail of Tears, and they've got we've got a global World Indigenous Peoples Day. So we celebrated that by launching our new Xbox logos that Jen did, and Jules and Cecilia. there's all sorts of different things that we're doing, but for me, it's more about making sure that we're setting something up for the future, because I'll be here for a point in time. But if we're not making it better for people like my kids who are coming through, and your kids, or whoever's kids, so that when they come into this space, they feel like it's a space that is, it embraces their different cultural values. And then the last one of that is, how do we put a cultural lens across our technologies? So, we've launched the Aotearoa keyboard. So that's now available on all of our devices globally, which means it's got the macrons inbuilt. It's all available. We've launched, obviously, Te reo Māori is now available across all of our platforms, and you can interact with reo Māori now on Azure or Dynamics or Office, Teams, PowerPoint. And then we've also got a whole bunch of other things that we've done, like around Minecraft, and we've got some great things in the works. I think where we're going, the goal is, what would it mean, one, if we had a global Indigenous office? That would be amazing, reporting into global. How would it be if we also came out formally and recognised the rights of the UN, a Declaration of Indigenous Peoples? These are journeys. It's going to take a while, because no company's come out and done that yet. But I mean, let alone countries have done that. There's still some countries who are yet to formally recognise that. So I think it's a journey, but I'd love us to keep working towards that and not give up.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. There are so many things there, and that's like my big takeaway. So I won't try to pick on one detail or another as something to talk about, but just the number of things. So if we went back 5 years, maybe it was nothing from anyone. Now, so it really feels like, we're accelerating. And my little thought or takeaway or comment to people, especially non-Māori, is that you might question, well, why do you need a special place or this or that for Indigenous, or this or that for Māori? And it's like, well, just flip it around and realize that you always had your space. Everybody's space is your way. So imagine if the current space that is considered everyone's space was not your way, and you didn't feel part of it. How might you feel? Well, we know anyone would feel quite terrible. So I always love to challenge people's thinking and try to flip it for them and give them that perspective. And quite often that's the magic, where they go, oh yeah, now I see it from my perspective. It was me being affected. So I just think it's magic that there are all these spaces created and growing and burgeoning on. So that leads us to...
I'll just say quickly, please, the Indigenous at Microsoft would never have happened without our allies. So allyship is so important, because Indigenous only represent 1% or so of Microsoft globally, of 144,000 people globally. So we would never be able to get the stuff across the line if we didn't have amazing allies. People like Vanessa here, people like all of our SLT, Stephen, who's our Australia New Zealand boss. He's one of our executive sponsors for Indigenous at Microsoft. So allyship is so important, I think, and there's a manaakitanga piece there too. How do we take care of allies so that when they go on that journey, they get supported through that too, and they don't feel beaten up? Because there's also times where it can be used as a weapon, particularly if they start stepping out and trying to even do a mihi or maybe do a waiata and stuff like that. So we've got to take care of our allies, find your people, and then manaaki them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Ironically, so I'll leave the names out, but I emceed an event, and the run sheet was changed as I walked up to the podium to MC, and it went from mihi mihi to pōwhiri. And in the space, I was literally I don't know everything in detail at that point. It was a few years back, but I do know the difference between mihi mihi and pōwhiri, and the substantial difference. And I was looking around going, we're in an auditorium. How's this going to happen? And I stumbled across the beginning, and there were some people that were offended and later complained. And I actually just got a message today to say, basically, you stuffed up then, but so wonderful to see what you're doing now. And I was
Oh, wow.
very pleased to be able to go back to them and say, hey, thanks for opening the lines of communication, because I knew that I had upset some people, but I just wanted to let you know that there was a little bit of a unintentional accident that happened that threw me off, and this is what it was. And as you might imagine, trying to work out how was the pōwhiri going to happen, and where were the people, and how was it just as I was walking on stage to kick off emceeing, kind of threw me, and apologize. So in the future, please just come and ask, because I felt terrible about it at the time. But it wasn't that I was ignorant or didn't care. It's the fact that I did care. And we've now had this amazing connection. So initially it was a bit of a complaint, and things are a bit tense. But now, because of the lines of communication have opened, and that's just another little message. You talk about safety and manaakitanga. So I think that with people make mistakes, and I'm bound to make quite a few, especially when I get excited, get going, and I miss a vowel or something like that. Then I think I would like to encourage people to just approach me and anyone else and say, "Hey, Ryan, these words, these are the ones you need to work on." And just on that, to put it in perspective, I was lucky enough to hear Renata Blair from BNZ speak last year, and this was an internal BNZ one. And what blew me away was he said, "I practice my vowels for half an hour a day," and I was like, "Well, hang on. If you're practicing your vowels for half an hour a day, how long do I need to practice?" I'd never thought about it. Like, yes, you need to practice and repetition. But this person is also doing it, and I thought, obviously can ask, and he didn't say, but I sort of thought to myself, if you spend most of your time speaking a different language, then you do need to put some concerted effort on practicing the other languages. So if you don't get time to speak to another person, which is what I've always been trying to do with my te reo, speak to other people. If you can't get that, you can at least practice to yourself. I was like, wow, what a great inspiration, something to weave into my days in the future.
Renata is an inspiration, bro, definitely. And that is also for me a bit of a kick up the ass too, bro. I need to keep immersing myself back home in my marae, back in Taranaki, because it doesn't take long for me to lose it. I need to keep coming back to it. I keep we're doing karakia with my tamariki. One thing I will say, and this is what my kaumātua said too, is have a relationship with te reo Māori, as in just like you've got your relationship with your partner, with your nana or your koro, your dad, your mum, your love for them. You need to have that same love for te reo Māori, and so I think that's also another thing in terms of making sure that that's in a good space, because then everything else flows. You learn kupu better. You get into a space where things stick a bit better as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea. So I'm going to start using that, and I'll be quoting you on that one. So let's look at a third question, just to check. We're just on 28 minutes, and we're a little bit over because we started late. Are you okay for time?
Yeah. Yep.
You good? Okay. So the third question was, what do you see happening in the future, needed in the future, or what would you love to see in the future? But as we go forward, what are your thoughts of what we could do, you want to do?
When I look at how far we've come, there's also, with that commensurate growth, has become a bit of a cultural tax on Māori spaces as well, and we need to be cognizant of that. How we, again, manaaki, take care of those whānau who are going through these spaces. Well, I look at Microsoft's a good example. We want to get more Māori and Pacific in here, and but if we don't mentor them, coach them, and support them, and when they're in here, then they're going to leave. They'll go somewhere else, and it's really important that we don't put that cultural load on them. So I'd love us to start thinking about that more, how we look after Māori who are going into more and more spaces, because we want because we want them, because we want to get more exposure to te reo Māori, then we've got to also know how to take care of them. Even we've got to pay them a bit more. We've got to pay them if they're going to be doing a lot and stepping up and doing a lot more of that stuff too. If I was to think, if I could wave my magic wand, bro, it would be to, with particularly for our young and our future generations, is to just ensure that some of the things that we've got of the past that are still dragging over into now, we let go of some of those things and we embrace a future of positive opportunity and innovation. And I think that's coming. I see it with my own kids. They have unlimited possibility of where things can go. And I look at my own self. I'm already over the hill, bro. I'm 40, and I'm a pakeke. Basically, I need to make space for them so that we can bring their ideas in. Of course, we manaki them because they've got all sorts of amazing. One thing that Joshy said, bro, was he'd love for an AI version of Nana, my Nana chick. Te Rautuhuia Taranaki was her name. But an AI digital version of her that he could talk to, so that he could get some of the mātauranga that she had. But because she's an AI version, not only will she have the mātauranga, the knowledge of the past, she'll also be connected to the current and the future, so she'll be able to make it relevant to him. And I was like, bro, that's an awesome idea. And my Nana was one of the most loving and beautiful women in the world for me. And I couldn't imagine something more amazing. I would fall over myself and I would work the rest of my life to make that happen for him if I could. And I think that would be an amazing future if we could make that happen.
Absolutely. Well, one of our guests later on this week is Megan Tapsell, who you obviously know is a rangatira in the Māori space, but also chair of the AI Forum. And yesterday was the Aotearoa AI Summit. And there were two different sections of the day, or three actually. I think one was like business pitches. One was the hackathon, where they had 7 regional hackathons. They had the 7 regional winners. And then they had 5 students that got up and talked about their PhD, or 7 students that got up and talked about their PhDs. So different things that they're doing or building or focused on within AI. So I think that, cool, you've now created a project for you and Joshy, and Megan would love to hear about it. And I think that there's probably a few people that would want to get in there, because you'll need to build your team, of course. But I think it would be amazing. You know what we're talking about, man. It's machine learning to take all that data in. There'll be some HoloLens, or maybe some sort of graphics. But this is the version of your technology. Maybe it's a project that Indigenous Microsoft want to support and get involved in. Who knows?
Challenge accepted.
We'll leave
Challenge
that for the future content. But it will be pretty exciting stuff, man. Well, if you think about it, this has real personal reverence to you. But it also has a business connection for, say, the likes of Microsoft. So there's not like a random project like Dan. What are you talking about? Obviously you're Nan, but because it has that business sense to it. This is going to happen in the future at some point. It is. So why not start now? I don't know, but we'll leave you that with you to have discussions at the Microsoft whare with the people, see where that goes. But I think it's a beautiful idea, and it will be exciting, because I just think about my grandfather passed away when I was 6. So I'm sure there's people out there like me who would want the extra 20 years maybe that you might have had, or that people normally might have with their grandparents, rather than passing before you're born or exiting. But we'll see what happens. So let's come to the closing, and I'll give you a few minutes to think of your closing remarks. And this is always part of our show, where we do a little bit of a summary, give you the time to think about closing remarks. And it's obviously, what you would like to talk about. So it's not a particular subject or anything. It could be something we've already covered. So you have to have a moment to think about that. So just as a reminder, we are running a 2022 interview series for Te Wiki o Te reo Māori, which is Māori Language Week, and it's about the resurrection, resurgence, revitalization of the language. We did a series of 35 Māori rangatira in 2020 about their personal journey as a way to teach people from personal stories about the history of Aotearoa New Zealand and why Māori is not so commonly spoken, but is now increasing. So everyone will get that lesson education, not just from the history books, but from the people. And today we've heard from Dan. He recounted his personal journey for us. We then looked at things that have happened over the last 2 years, from both personal, I guess, national, global, and his work environment. And then lastly, what does the future hold? And talked about the cultural tax that can get put onto Māori, because everyone's now getting so excited and keen and enthusiastic. And the expectation is, well, you can help. Well, maybe they can, maybe they can't, but there are professional cultural advisors that we should be engaging for that, because it's a full. And of course, the potential for your son Joshi to still engage with your late Nana Chick, by having an AI version of her. So with that, Matua Te Whenua Walker, your closing remarks, please.
Kia ora koutou e wakarongo mai. I wouldn't say that I'm a rangatira. I would say that I'm a connector. I'm a bridge into te ao Māori. There are an amazing rangatira, though, who uphold our pai, who ahi ka, they keep the fires burning. And those are the people that I would love us to think about in this Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. They're the ones who are day in, day out, at home, upholding our mauri and our mana of te iwi Māori. And when we look into any of our spaces that we go, how do we uplift community? Make sure that we're not the ones trying to lead out on this stuff, because there's amazing people in the community already doing beautiful stuff that we can uplift. I would like us to I'll throw that challenge out. But lovely to be here with you, bro, and to connect with everyone, and to celebrate Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, and just want to send my love out to Aotearoa at this time. Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi. So I'll say ka kite anō to everybody, but first of all, tēnā rawa atu koe. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll sign off for today. Thank you very much, Dan, and ka kite anō, everybody.
He kona, bro.